The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
And Mike, you know the reason I had you on, so let me just remind our listening audience what's going on here, and then I'm going to speak for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to hush and let Mike do a lot of the talking, if not all of it, because what he has to say will be important in relation to what I'm going to say. Several months ago, Mike Zullo and I went to CPAC 2013 up in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, and then from there we went over to Capitol Hill. We visited with several Congress people. That's when we had the meeting with Alan West. That's when, or Mike Zullo did. That's when we had the meeting with Steve Stockman. That's when we had the meeting with Congressman Jeff Miller and others, and some whom we're not allowed to speak their names yet. But and that's when we were just kind of hobnobbing, rubbing shoulders and elbows with VIPs to see if we could get anybody to look at this criminal investigation evidence as a result of this 2-year investigation. So you know that. Well, we told you we went to Capitol Hill to visit with some congressmen and some chiefs of staff, and we did. Well, one of the congressmen that we visited with, I had a good meeting, a 30-minute meeting, and about 30 minutes or so, and with the chief of staff. And I'm not going to go into the details of this because this is where I want Mike Zullo just to tell it as he remembers it without any coaching from me. So I'm going to give you the skeleton outline and what the deal is here. The deal is that we had this meeting, and in that meeting it was agreed upon that when this particular congressman, who I've given his name now, I mean, we promised you months ago we would give his name if he didn't do the right thing. Well, he never did the right thing. And his name is Jeff Miller, Florida District 1 congressman. His chief of staff is Dan McFall. The booking secretary's name is Jessica. Jessica, Dan McFall, Jeff Miller, I'm going to tell you, they were very gracious. They were very kind. They did everything they told us they would do as far as receiving us, having a meeting with us. Jessica was just wonderful on the phone. Her emails to me were polite, to the point. Dan McFall, all of that. So I have no complaints with any of that. But follow me now. So we have this meeting, and Mike Zullo talks with the congressman. I'll let him give you his view of it in a moment. And it was agreed upon that when Jeff Miller came back to Florida, that Mike Zullo would fly to Florida and that I was to be in that meeting. We were to come back together and meet with Jeff Miller in his office, and Mike Zullo was going to bring certain information. I'm going to let Mike tell you about that and what the congressman wanted with that information. From there, we came home. And after, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 days, I started emailing Jeff Miller's office through Dan McFall and Jessica saying, now look, when's this meeting going to take place? Mike has to make the arrangements. And so I've got this whole email chain, which I have printed on the Internet. And I can read the very last one to you in a moment because I think the last one's kind of the money shot email. And we had emails and phone calls, but the email chain is what's important because that's a matter of public record, and I possess them, and you know, I guess most anybody could get them if they requested them through the proper channels. But the bottom line is, so we get home, and I go through several days of emails and phone calls, and here's the last email. This is from Jessica. Now, I've got emails from Dan McFall, the chief of staff, that are similar to this, but it says, "Hi, Carl. The office meeting next Thursday will take place in Congressman Miller's Pensacola office located at 4300 Bayou Boulevard, Suite 13. Let me know if you have any other questions. Congressman Miller looks forward to seeing you and Lieutenant Zullo at 9 a.m. Thanks, with an exclamation point, Jessica." I wrote her back, said, "Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate your help. Lieutenant Zullo will bring all the information requested. We look forward to the congressman's input and assistance." Now, all of that is fine. But what happens is a day or two after that email and the finality of that meeting, I got a call from Dan McFall, the chief of staff, telling me, and my wife was sitting in the room, so she heard my side of the conversation, telling me that the meeting was nixed. There would be no meeting. And now, folks, hear me. Even that's okay with me. But then he said the reason the meeting was nixed is because they never asked for the meeting in the first place. They didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't know anything about a meeting with Lieutenant Zullo. What in the world was I talking about? I was Jeff Miller's constituent, not Zullo. Why did I think that that the congressman wanted a meeting with Lieutenant Zullo? And I told Dan McFall, I said, Dan, this is surreal. Certainly, this is not how you're going to handle it. In other words, you're trying to make me think I'm crazy. You're trying to make me think I'm just a big old fat liar and that I don't know what I'm talking about. I said, but you forgot. I've got this whole email chain coming from your office and Jessica's office wherein Lieutenant Zullo is named by you and by me and by Jessica that you knew he was coming and you were setting up the meeting for Lieutenant Zullo. At which point the phone almost went dead. I had to ask him, are you still there? And then he let it be known that he was not real happy about me using that email chain because basically he was trying to gaslight me. So anyway, I'm through talking. The bottom line is I've told you who it was. This is the kind of despicableness that we've run into, that Mike Zullo has run into for years. A lot of you have asked the question of why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Because you've got congressmen saying, okay, I'll meet. Line it up. All right, meet. And then we get calls. We don't know what you're talking about. All right, Mike Zullo, I'm going to hush. To the best, Mike, just tell the folks, we went to Capitol Hill. You take it from there and tell what you remember. And if I said anything different from what you remember, just correct me. I don't care. I just want the truth. So you just tell what you remember and how all this came down.
Well, Carl, to back up a little bit, this meeting was actually put together by you prior to us going to CPAC. So the meeting at Capitol Hill that day was already in the works as we were traveling.
Right.
And if memory serves, we got that confirmation the day or the day after we arrived. Like you said, we arrived at Capitol Hill, but the original meeting was supposed to be a lunch meeting.
Right.
We were going to be having lunch in the same rooms there senators and congressmen convened for lunch. And that on our en route, as we were en route, that got canceled. We got a phone call. There was some voting going on. He wasn't going to be able to do lunch, but they still instructed us to go to the Capitol, and he would have about 15, 20 minutes in between voting sessions to do that. So we arrived at the Capitol. We were met by Dan after going through the metal scanners and everything that goes on there. Dan was gracious. He walked us through underground corridors to get to where we had to have this little meeting. We entered this very majestic room. It was like full of history. It was incredible. We sat down. We talked to Dan for, I think it was about 30 minutes, and explaining to Dan what we were looking to accomplish. At that point, the congressman came in. He sat down. I went over with him what we had, what we were investigating with under Sheriff Arpaio. And the congressman was very attentive. He asked a lot of questions, and he asked one question in particular that actually thrilled me. He asked if I would be willing to give over our forensic evidence to him for his independent review and analysis through people that he is associated with.
Right. And he serves on the Select Committee on Intelligence, and we knew that, so we figured, well, he could surely get it done. Go ahead.
Yes, and when he did that, I was thrilled. This is somebody that's serious. So that was the premise for the following meeting, and I agreed to do that. When we left, we were given a tour, and I do recall you making a gesture to him. I believe it was a handshake, and said, please tell me you're going to follow through with this. I remember him saying that this was going to happen, and we left. Over the coming days, there was email notification that this meeting was going to take place. You alerted me via email and telephone call that this was going to happen on such a date and the location, and I promptly notified Sheriff Arpaio, and I then made the reservations for airfare and hotel and I believe a rental vehicle. It wasn't but 24 hours after that you called me and told me that they canceled the meeting. Right. And we were kind of in the dark for a little bit as to why. I thought maybe it was just going to be postponed. And then you ended up calling me and telling me the story that you just relayed, that the telephone conversation was like being in the Twilight Zone.
Right.
That it was nothing is what transpired. And I do remember you and I talking and going, God, do they know that they have emails saying something completely different?
Right.
And, at that point, you try to dust it off. And you try to sit back and you try to say to yourself, look, what happened here? Here is somebody that I know was interested. I know was paying attention to what I was saying. I don't believe for 1 minute at that time that congressman was giving me lip service.
No, I didn't either. I thought he was very sincere. I was thrilled.
And something changed.
Yeah.
And when you told me as this progressed over, I think this went on for a couple of days, you told me that they were willing to meet with you but didn't want to meet with me.
Right.
That was the telling sign for me.
Right.
They don't want to know what we have.
Right.
And that seems to be a reoccurring theme. And, maybe by telling the story, your listening audience can understand why this is taking so long. Because it's something we've encountered over and over and over again.
Right. And you know what's so interesting, Mike? You said they didn't want to know what you had. But at that meeting on Capitol Hill, not only did he want to know what you had, but he wanted to take that information and submit it to his own forensics. He was so interested. And then all of a sudden, he didn't want to know anything that you had.
And that's right. That's right, Carl. And when you have somebody that's on the committee that he's on and he says he wants to get it independently reviewed, I couldn't wait for that to happen.
Right, because you're that sure of the information you have.
Yes, that's what I relayed to Sheriff Arpaio.
Yeah.
Before I made the meeting, that he wants the info and he wants to get it independently verified, and Arpaio was delighted.
Right, and Arpaio has said, you have said, I have said, and we told the congressman, all we want is the truth. If we turn it all over to you, and you can show us with verifiable evidence that it's all a crock, we'll walk away from it. I mean, we were anxious for him to take a look at it, just like you took it before all the sheriffs and police chiefs and attorneys and laid it out. I mean, you were anxious for a peer review, and he was anxious to do it. But the next thing, I get a call. And, well, Mike, listen, we got to take a break. I've got all kind of analysis I want you and I to do on this when we come back. Plus, we can take some phone calls. Are you up for that?
That'll be fine.
Okay, good. Folks, you are listening to Freedom Friday. Mike Zullo is my guest this afternoon. You know what we're talking about. If you want to be a part of this, 623-1330, area code 850. By the way, go to carlgallops.com, click on the Freedom Friday link. At the top of the page, you'll see a bright yellow link to this Congressman Jeff Miller and his email chain. If you'll click on that, not only is the whole story there and all of the emails, but every address and phone number to all of his offices so that you can be a part of letting them know how absolutely enraged you are that this has been done to Lieutenant Zullo and this process. We'll be right back after this timeout.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.